Raph, there's a lot in the news today. I spent a lot of time today because I asked our listeners about Christine Fréchette. Given all the things she's done, would you consider voting for her? I want to talk about a couple of things that you have noted here, but the one thing I want to ask is, and I said this as part of our discussion, with respect to everything else she's done business-wise, the small and medium business stuff, has there been anything on English, on Bill 96, since the day she became leader or not? Because I haven't heard anything, and she has refused every chance, every offer to come on English radio so far. Have you heard anything, or am I missing something here?
Not to my recollection, but see, she met with unions, was it today or yesterday? And unions came out of the meeting quite satisfied with the tone of the new premier. So it seems like there's a major shift in terms of how she approaches some of the files that her predecessor maybe mismanaged at a certain level. So that could change also. Who knows? She's more moderate than François Legault, that's for sure.
Let's talk about the issue with her, which is this idea, which is not a surprise after that fiscal update and the money for skilled worker training. Of course, we knew the next step would be, thanks for the money, Ottawa. Don't tell us what to do with it. That's the approach Quebec always takes. What did she do?
Well, it's a question of respecting the province's jurisdiction. The training of new skilled workers is a responsibility of the province, not just in Quebec, but all across the country.
Right.
That's constitutional. That's written in our constitution. So what Christine Fréchette said about it is that, hold on a second, we're happy that you're putting forward more money. It's $6 billion over the next 5 years. Yeah. So that would be roughly $1 billion just for Quebec. So $200 million a year of new money to train new skilled workers. The federal government wants to train 100,000 new skilled workers over the next 5 years to respond to our businesses' needs in across the country. But what Quebec is saying is, hold on a second. We're all in for that, but you're going to give us the money and we're going to do what we want to do with it. You're not going to tell us what to do with it.
Nothing new. That's
nothing new, of course. And it's the approach any government would have. Yes, we have a so-called nationalist government in Quebec City at the moment, but even if they were liberals right now in Quebec City, the discourse would be roughly the same, because any Quebec premier would first and foremost defend the Quebec, the province's interest and its jurisdiction. So that it's a normal thing to hear from a Quebec premier, but I hope that we will have a government. It's something that's recurring with the Liberal Party particularly. It's a party that tends to try and centralize as much as possible towards Ottawa and not always respects the province's fields of competence. So it's something that we wanted to hear from Christine Fréchette, and I'm glad she mentioned it to François-Philippe Champagne here.
I want to talk about this other story, which I've not talked about at all this afternoon. I saw a quick note on this. Carney government talking about reviving the idea of privatizing airports in this country. Now, this is interesting, and I remember this discussion from a while ago.
Yeah.
Most places have, airports that are privatized, right?
Well, if you compare to Europe, for instance, 40% of airports in Europe are privatized. Yes,
and the U.S., they're all privatized.
It's not unusual. It's not unusual, but the thing is, what's in it for us in the end? Because there's a CJAD Institute research that recently showed that if we were to sell, because we changed the way we manage our airports in Canada in the 1980s, so now the major airports in the country are managed by non-profit organizations, which rent the land that is owned by the federal government. So that brings revenues to Ottawa every year. It's about roughly $500 million every year. So what the government is looking into right now is to sell that land and make it all private. Now, if we sell that land, CTV Institute has estimated that we would basically bring in new money, roughly between $7 and $17 billion if we sold those airports and the land. Okay. That's a lot of money. But if you take into consideration the fact that those nonprofit organizations pay rent to use federal land, that brings $500 million to the government every year. So if you make $7 billion by selling those airports to the private sector, fine. But that means that in 14 years from now, we don't have any more the $500 million of revenue of income that's coming into the public coffers every year.
Unless there's a deal worked out with the private developers that's beyond just the price they pay for the land to develop the airport. There's also money coming in from services that run at the airport, right? We get a piece of that too.
Sure, but the more you add to the burden of those businesses, the more they will raise the fees for airlines. And what are airlines going to do in the end?
But we're already paying more because the government runs those airports for those airline tickets. I thought the idea when they're privatized, yes, it has to be for profit, but it would be less than we're actually paying now with the government running it.
You know, Aaron, I'm usually all in for privatization of public institutions. I have no problem with that. But the thing is, right now, it's not as if it was a government entity that's managing. It's nonprofit organizations that are paying rent to the government, and it brings income to the government. So we have to take into consideration, we have to balance it. Okay. Are we better off keeping $500 million of revenues every year on the long term, or should we get right now $7 to $17 billion? And what are we going to do with that money?
We're going to invest that money, Raph. And when we invest that money, we're going to make interest on that money. And that interest will actually cover more than the money we're getting from the nonprofits that are paying us now.
Well, I mean, invest in what?
A sovereign wealth fund. What about that? We can invest it in the sovereign wealth fund.
That's new. Talk to me about that.
Huh?
Never heard about that idea.
I think it's a great idea. There's one place to put some money. We're going to make money on our money. That's the whole idea behind doing something like this.
Well, we already have assets that are generating revenues, $500 million. That's the land we own.
That's penny. It's penny ante money compared to the $17 billion we're going to get when we sell it and invest it.
And compared to the $66 billion of deficit we have right now in the economic update. In the end, I mean, $17 billion for the federal government. It's pocket change. It's nothing. So to me, it's not really there. I don't see the point in doing that.
Okay.
It's a risk we're taking. It's a risk also for airlines. It's a risk for travelers, because in the end, if airline fees are higher, they're going to transfer those costs to travelers, and it's already costing too much in Canada to travel by air.
We can sit and discuss this forever. I don't agree. I think at the end of the day, those airline fees are not going to go up. They're going to be pretty much where they are now because we're already paying. But I will tell you another thing. Imagine people listening to this thinking when you said $17 billion at the end of the day, that's just a drop in the bucket. That's a quarter of our deficit right there, just by selling that land to develop private airports.
For just 1 year, you still have a recurring deficit. You still
and let's imagine that we invest that $17 billion at 10%, right? And we make $170 million a year just by putting our money in there.
I would rather have our government look into its expenditures and reduce government expenditures and the size of the state, so that on the long term, we don't have deficits. We go back to a balanced budget rather than selling critical assets to just fund 1 year, a quarter of our deficit.
Okay. I think with interest rates being as low as they are now, and they're likely to go lower before they go higher at 2.25%, we are better off having that deficit now and paying it at that rate. I know it's not 0.5% anymore, than waiting for the interest rates to be, you're not old enough to remember when interest rates are 15 and 16%. So when it's 2.25%, that's a time for you to be borrowing money and investing. Then I think to go ahead and just keep airports public. A discussion for another day.
You have the right to your point of view.
One other thing I want to touch on, let me get to this because this is kind of interesting as well. So what is Curam software and why is this in the news?
So Curam software, remember Phoenix, the
pay system.
The pay system at the federal level. So about 10 years ago, we found out that there was a major fiasco there because the system was not working. It cost...
For years, right?
For years it was not working. I think still today, some employees have not retrieved all the money that they were owed by the government. And it cost, the cost exploded. So Curam shows that we haven't learned lessons from our past mistakes, because it's yet another government software where the costs have exploded at least four times. It was supposed to cost initially in 2017, the estimate was $1.75 billion, and now it's costing at least $6.6 billion, and it's not over because yet again, it's not working.
What was this for? What was it designed to do?
Right now, the software manages payments for old age security.
Okay.
So you have right now, they implemented it recently, and you have right now elderly people who don't have access to the money that they are owed by the government.
Because of this.
Okay. And eventually the system is also going to be responsible for employment security, employment insurance payments.
Oh no.
Oh yes. That's a lot of people that could be affected by this, on top of elderly people who are not receiving the money that they need to have.
How did we screw this up?
So, of course, it's yet again another government project that's not delivered on time and on budget. But the thing is, the reason why we talk about it today is this morning in parliamentary committee, both the Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives tried to look into it and to get access to some documents from the Privy Council and the Prime Minister's office. Okay. And now, we have a majority government in Ottawa. So now they control parliamentary committees. Right. So they avoided to have to answer tough questions, and they stopped short the inquiry that the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois wanted to have on the topic because of their new majority. They now have the powers to avoid that. So we need, at a time when we need transparency on those projects, $6.6 billion, 4 times what it was initially supposed to cost. Canadians want to have answers about it, and they won't have those answers because in the end, that new government of Canada, the current government, now has a majority.
Well, at some point, they will have to obviously provide an answer to this. I'd never heard that even Curam brought up before. Was this something that had come up before?
Yes. It's not brand new.
No?
It's not the first time we hear about the Curam's difficulties. It's been a few months now that some elderly people don't have access to their money from the old age pension plan. But still, I mean, it's a lack of transparency, and we see now the impact of having a majority government in Ottawa. It means less transparency, less accountability. That's tough. That's a tough one for a francophone. Accountability. There you go. And in the end, the public loses at it because we don't have answers to critical questions, important questions that need to be answered. It's our money, our public money, our taxpayers' money that's being spent without us being able to find out what happened.
Without, as you said, the accountability here. Where is it? We don't know. So let's hope that there are some answers to this
public
question.
Servants using new money, but they don't want to answer any questions about it.
All right. Curam. We'll have to keep an eye on that.
Curam.
I'm Luke Wilson. Join me each week for Film Never Lies. Since retiring from the NFL, I've had a lot on my mind, and now I've got my own show. So if you're tired of lazy takes, if you want honest conversations, join us each week. Film Never Lies, available on all TSN platforms and the iHeartRadio app.